Hey Eagles, my name's Cole, and the last couple months have kind of felt like a decade of their own. I mean, the sheer amount of stuff that has happened is almost too much to keep up with. And while we're so consumed in our current situation, sometimes it can be fun to look back in the past, specifically at times that we weren't even able to live in. So let's do just that. Let's take a look at some of the recent decades that we missed out on. ENN starts now. Now, based on my young, spry demeanor and the fact that I call this a remote and not a clicker, it comes as no surprise that I wasn't, born in the 60s. But I did hear some pretty big things happen then, so let's go to Nalani to tell us all about it.
The 1960s gave birth to a popular culture in film and music that reflected and influenced the social decade of Peavens. The rise of the Cold War politics, Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, and student protests all profoundly affected American society and culture. During the 60s, authors strived to relate their stories to the public's struggles and their successes. These struggles and successes included poor race relation, gender issues, feminism, and society roles. Music in the 1960s was marked by the British invasion, the Motown Record Company, the culture of drugs, and the peace and love songs. Known as one of the most pivotal moments in music history, Woodstock was a musical festival in 1969, which more than 500,000 people attended, located in a dairy farm in New York. Woodstock signified peace, cultural expression, and youth. The 1960s were a time of colorful clothing. Bright colored shoes were thrown together with bright color outfits. The shoes always matched the purse. That's all the time I have for today, Eagles. I'm Nalani, signing off of ENN.
Thanks, Nalani. Now, another shocker, I wasn't a thing in the 70s, but bell-bottoms and feathered hair was, and I think that deserves my utmost attention. Let's go to Kate for more.
That 70s show is probably my favorite show yet, so I clearly take an interest in the 70s decade. Honestly, what's not to love? This era had a unique variety of fashion and entertainment that influenced much of what came next. Popular styles in the 70s included bell-bottoms, flare sleeves, tie-dye patterns, the iconic afro, and blown-out curls. Many of these style choices were set towards accentuating height and length. You may have noticed a few of these coming back in younger crowds today. Disco, pop, R&B, and rock all carved out a place in the music world in the 1970s. Popular 70s songs you may be familiar with are Dream On, Staying Alive, and I Will Survive. This was truly a time of thriving music with so many talented bands on the rise, such as Fleetwood Mac, Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, and for a little while, the Beatles. Keeping with the entertainment theme, movies also had a special place back then. The 70s gave us the original Star Wars and Superman the movie. It's also important to look at events that took place during this lively decade. In just these short 10 years, we gained the mobile phone, Apple, and Microsoft, which all played a huge role in getting society to where it is today. On a more serious note, in 1971, the 26th Amendment was ratified, which allowed 18-year-olds to vote. I think that the 70s was a great decade to be a part of, and if I could, I would definitely bring back their hairstyles and their fashion. Until next year, Eagles, I'm Kate, ENN.
Now, I didn't grow up in the 80s, but sometimes it feels like I did because my parents forced me to watch every single 80s movie there is. I mean, every single time I close my eyes now, all I see is Molly Ringwald. And yes, I do know that is a personal problem, and the 80s probably have so much more to offer. So let's go to Hayden for more.
Most of us born in Generation Z have parents that lived in or lived throughout the 80s. But some of us might think that it's just another decade. However, the luckier of us have been introduced to the cool music and amazing movies. One of the top tier must-watch 80s movies is called The Breakfast Club. It's a movie that examines high school cliches through 5 kids that have to serve their way through Saturday detention. This movie was directed by John Hughes, and he also directed one of my favorite 80s movies of all time, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This movie is about Ferris Bueller, a teenager who plays hooky from school, then goes on a wild chase with his friends across town while trying to get away from Principal Rooney. Another part of the 80s that was amazing was the music. One of the famous musicians was the Purple Pact person himself, Prince. He was the famous writer of many songs like Little Red Corvette, Purple Rain, Raspberry Beret, and many more. There was another famous band of the 80s called U2. They had famous songs like Sunday Bloody Sunday, With or Without You, and a song about Martin Luther King Jr. called Pride in the Name of Love. Sadly, that's all the facts I have for now, Eagles. But now I'm gonna go binge some 80s movies. Remember, I'm Hayden reporting for ENN.
We're learning a lot about these recent decades, but it would be interesting to see what your Eagles already know and how you feel about them. Let's go to Cadence for more on that.
Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show that made you want to make a time machine and move in that period? Well, I can definitely relate. But besides all of the acting, we've had some pretty amazing events occur and things discovered. It's Cadence for ENN. A decade of hope. That's right, it's the 1960s. The 1960s were obviously made popular with the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War. But I'll let Nalani tell you all about it with polka dot printed fabrics and some bubble sleeves. Now we have the 70s, made popular with homemade clothing and the release of Star Wars in 1977, which is obviously the most important event, and the birth of modern computing. The 90s seemed like such an interesting time to live in, and I'm sure your parents can tell you with so much more detail than that, but the 90s were definitely a time of trend, such as cartoons with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Everybody by the Backstreet Boys. Personally, my favorite decade is the 80s, and that's probably just because of Stranger Things, but that's relevant. The 80s were a time of the explosion of pop culture, with big hair and big rock bands that are still even played today. From the easy listening of Fleetwood Mac, landing on the moon, and the creation of the World Wide Web, time is always changing. And a great way to picture that is by interviewing some of you 80s babies on your favorite decade.
Hi, my name is Daniel. My favorite decade is the 2000s.
Hi, my name is Adriana. My favorite decade is the 90s.
Hi, my name's Evan, and my favorite decade is the 90s.
Hi, my name is Benson. My favorite decade is the 80s.
Hi, my name is Alexis, and my favorite decade is the 80s. Okay.
Hi, my name is Antonio, and my favorite decade is the 2000s.
I'm Timothy, and I wished I lived in the 90s.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I wish I had lived in the 18th century.
Well, Eagles, we've definitely gotten our history lesson in for today, and maybe I taught you something that the movies didn't. It's Cadence for ENN.
Now, since I grew up in the early 2000s, the 90s never seemed like they were that far away, but then I did the math and realized that 1990 was over 31 years ago. And now, I don't know what I know, or what I should know. But Chesney probably knows, so let's go to her. Thanks, Chesney. I didn't know that about... Oh, actually, one second, I got a text. Speaking of which, did you know that the first text was actually sent in the 90s? On December 3rd of 1992, Neil Papworth sent Richard Jarvis a text that simply said, Merry Christmas. Now, about the text that I got, it's from Miss Turner. Cole, if you forget to do the announcements again, I'm good. Let's go to the announcements. Eagles, today is the last day of school, and it's also an early release day. The next school year will start on August 10th, which means we have exactly 65 days to our break. But don't get too comfortable on those last couple days because orientation is on the 6th. Today's word of the day is one of my own choosing, and it is collywobbles, which means I have a bellyache. And I refuse to let it be any other word because that one is just too much fun to say. And last but certainly not least, today is National Egg Day. And you may be asking yourself, why is this important? Because eggs are amazing. I mean, there's a reason why the average American eats 293 of them a year. I mean, you can eat them sunny side up, fried, scrambled, or even raw. Just be careful on the last one. It might just give you the collywobbles. And on that note, Eagles, hopefully you learned something today. It's been a rough year for everyone, and you should all be patting yourselves on the back for making it through. I hope you all have a great summer, and it's been Cole signing off of ENN.